I still think about the way the light looked that mornings. It was one of those early March days in Tennessee where the sky can't quite decide what it wants to be, too gray for spring, too bright for winter. The kids were already at school. I had a load of laundry going, a cup of coffee sitting on the counter getting cold, and a Tuesday stretching out in front of me like any other Tuesday. That was the last ordinary morning I ever had. His name is Garrett. We met at a church potluck when I was 24 years old and he was 26, and I want you to understand something before I tell you the rest of this. I love that man completely. Not perfectly, not without arguments or hard seasons or years when we were more like roommates than partners, but completely. The way you love someone when you have built your entire adult life alongside them. The way you love someone whose coffee order you know by heart, whose bad knee predicts rain better than any weather app, whose laugh you can pick out in a crowded room before you even see his face. 14 years, 2 kids, a brick ranch house on a quiet street in a town where everybody knows your name and mostly means it kindly. That was my life and I loved it. Garrett worked in commercial HVAC. He was out of the house most mornings before I was fully awake, driving his company truck to job sites all over the county. Some days he was home by 5, some days, especially in summer, it was closer to 7 or 8. I never questioned it. The work was real. The paychecks were real. I had driven past enough of his job sites over the years to have a picture of his days that felt solid and accounted for. He was a good father. I want to say that plainly. Coached Little League 2 springs in a row even when the season ran long. Showed up to every single one of our daughter Lily's school programs, even the 45-minute 3rd grade recorder concert that I think genuinely tested us all. He remembered which stuffed animal our son Caleb couldn't sleep without and knew exactly how to fix the nightlight when the bulb went out at 2 in the morning. This is the part that makes it hard to explain to people who haven't lived it. There was so much good. The bad thing and the good thing existed in the same man, in the same house, at the same kitchen table. That doesn't make the bad thing smaller, but it does make the story more honest. The first time something felt slightly off, I couldn't have even told you what it was exactly. It was sometime in January. We had just come through the holidays, Thanksgiving at my mother's in Knoxville, Christmas at home, New Year's Eve quiet on the couch because we were both too tired for anything else. I remember thinking somewhere around mid-January that Garrett seemed different, not cold exactly, not distant in any way I could point to, just somewhere else. Like part of his attention was always just slightly to the left of wherever I was standing. I told myself it was the post-holiday slump. I told myself work had picked up. I told myself that after 14 years you couldn't expect someone to be fully present every single moment, and that expecting it was probably my issue, not his. That is what I told myself. He started taking his phone into the bathroom. I noticed it once and filed it away without meaning to. He had never done that before, or if he had, I hadn't clocked it as unusual. Now it registered faintly, like a word you hear in a conversation that doesn't quite fit the sentence, but you can't figure out why. He started leaving it face down on surfaces. The counter, the nightstand, the end table by his chair. Face down. I hate that I noticed. I hate that my brain cataloged it without my permission. The way you notice a small crack in the ceiling above your bed, and then suddenly it's the first thing you see every morning. There was a night in early February when his phone buzzed while he was in the shower. I was sitting right there on the bed, folding a pile of laundry, and I looked at the screen without even deciding to. The preview was cut off. A name I recognized. A message I couldn't read fully but caught one word of before the screen went dark. The name was Donna. Donna Marsh. She had been my closest friend for 9 years. I sat there with a pair of his socks in my hands and I thought, there is a completely reasonable explanation for this. They knew each other through me. Of course they had each other's numbers. Of course she might text him occasionally. Maybe she was planning something for my birthday. Maybe she needed his advice about something around her house. Donna's husband Travis wasn't handy, and Garrett was always the person people called when something needed fixing. I put the socks down, I picked them back up, I finished folding the laundry. I didn't say a word. That is the thing about being a woman who trusts people. You are very, very good at talking yourself back from the edge of something you're not ready. What is it? It was 3 weeks later on that gray March Tuesday that I went out to his truck to look for Caleb's baseball glove. Garrett had driven Caleb to practice the week before, and I figured the glove was still rolling around in there somewhere. I climbed into the passenger seat, reached back, checked the floorboard. I found a water bottle, a receipt from a gas station, a folded paper napkin. And then I saw it. Tucked under the front seat on the driver's side, pushed back toward the center console, half hidden under a worn edge of the seat mat. A phone, a second phone, dark screen, no case. I picked it up like I was picking up something that might break, or something that might break me. It wasn't locked. And the name at the top of the most recent messages, the contact saved with a little heart next to it, was Donna. I sat in that truck for a long time before I could make myself look at the screen again. The engine wasn't running, the heat wasn't on. I could feel the cold coming up through the seat, through my jeans, settling into me the way cold does when you stop moving. A neighbor's dog was barking 2 houses down. A school bus went past at the end of the street. Everything outside that truck was completely normal and completely irrelevant to what was happening inside it. I looked at the messages. I won't tell you everything I read. Even now, there are parts of it I hold close to my chest, not because I'm protecting him, I'm not, but because some things, once you speak them out loud, take on a shape you can't put back. What I will tell you is that it was not new. The timestamps went back 8 months. 8 months of messages. 8 months of a conversation running parallel to my life that I had known nothing about. 8 months. Lily had started 4th grade during those 8 months. Caleb had lost his 2 front teeth. I had repainted the guest bedroom a soft sage green because Garrett said he liked the color. I had made Sunday dinners and driven carpool and sat in the same bed as this man and had absolutely no idea. I put the phone back exactly where I found it. That part surprises people when I tell them. They expect me to say I stormed inside or called him immediately or threw something. But I didn't. I placed the phone back under the seat, angled the same way it had been. I found Caleb's baseball glove wedged behind the passenger seat. I walked back inside the house, set the glove by the back door, and stood at the kitchen sink running cold water over my hands like I could wash off what I'd just touched. Then I sat down at the kitchen table and I cried, just for a few minutes, just enough to let the first wave of it move through me. Then I stopped because I had things to figure out and I could not figure them out if I fell apart. The first thing I felt, and this is going to sound strange, was embarrassed. Not at him, at myself. Because Donna had been in my home, she had sat at that kitchen table. She had come to Lily's birthday party in October and helped me set up the folding tables in the back backyard and laughed with me about the store-bought cake I'd tried to pass off as homemade. She had texted me 2 days before I found that phone to ask if I wanted to grab lunch that week. She had looked me in the eye for 8 months. I thought about every conversation I'd had with her during that time. I started cataloging them the way you go back through a document looking for errors you missed the first time. The lunch where she'd seemed slightly distracted but I'd assumed she was stressed about her marriage. She and Travis had been having a rough patch, she'd told me. The birthday dinner where Garrett had been quiet and I'd assumed he was tired from work. The text she'd sent me in December saying she was so grateful for my friendship, that I was one of the good ones. I had said the same thing back to her. I thought about the Sunday mornings we sat together at church, our families 2 pews apart. I thought about the way she'd hugged me on New Year's Eve and told me she hoped this year was everything I deserved. The cruelty of it wasn't loud, it was quiet, it was woven into everything. I did not call Garrett, I did not call Donna, I did not call my mother or my sister or anyone else. I picked Lily up from school at 3:15 and I helped her with her spelling words at the kitchen table and I made spaghetti for dinner and I watched Garrett come through that back door at 6 o'clock and hang his keys on the hook the same way he had hung his keys on that hook for 11 years. He kissed my cheek, he asked how my day was, I said fine. Fine. He didn't know that I knew, and for reasons I was still working out inside myself, I wasn't ready for him to know that I knew. Not yet. I needed to understand the full shape of what I was dealing with before I handed him the chance to explain it away. Because that was the thing about Garrett. He was good with words when he needed to be. He was calm under press. He had a way of reframing a situation so gently that you ended up apologizing for bringing it up in the first place. I had watched him do it with other people over the years. A conflict at work, a misunderstanding with a neighbor, and I had always admired it, his steadiness. I was not going to let that steadiness be used on me, not this time. So I watched, and I waited, and I paid attention in a way I had never let myself pay attention before. Over the next 4 days, I started noticing things I had been explaining away for months without realizing it. The nights he said he was tired and went to bed early, his phone always went with him. The Saturday 2 months ago when he said he'd run to Home Depot and came back 90 minutes later with nothing in his hands and a story about them being out of stock on what he needed. The way he laughed a little too quickly sometimes when her name came up. The way he almost never brought up her husband anymore, when Travis used to come up in conversation regularly. Small things, individually dismissible, together they built something solid and awful. On the 4th night, I waited until he was asleep and I went and sat in the living room in the dark. I thought about my daughter asleep down the hall with her stuffed elephant tucked under her arm. I thought about my son and his baseball glove by the back door. I thought about 14 years in a brick house, in a church pew, and a woman I had called my best friend. And I thought about who I was going to be on the other side of this, because there was no version of the future where I stayed on this side of it. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in months. I called Donna, she answered on the 2nd ring. Her voice was exactly the same as it always was. Warm, easy, a little rush the way she always sounded in the mornings. She said my name like it was something she was glad to hear, and for just a split second, one single second, I felt the ground shift under me, because that voice was my friend's voice. That was the voice that had talked me through my father's health scare 2 years ago. That was the voice that had sat with me on my back porch on a summer night and told me I was a good mother when I needed to hear it most. I breathed through it. I told her I needed to see her. I said I had something I wanted to talk through and could she meet me for coffee? I kept my voice light and easy and normal. I was surprised how simple it was, how well I could do it. She said yes without hesitating. Thursday morning, the coffee shop on Mercer Street, 10 o'clock. I said perfect. I said I'd see her then. I hung up the phone and I stood in my kitchen and I let myself feel the full weight of what I was about to do. Thursday morning came cold and clear. I dropped the kids at school, drove to Mercer Street, and sat in my car in the parking lot for 10 minutes before I went inside. I ordered my coffee at the counter. I picked a table near the window. I watched the door. She walked in at 5 after 10 wearing a yellow jacket I had told her looked beautiful on her when she bought it last fall. She was smiling. She looked for me, found me, waved. She came to the table and she hugged me before she sat down and I let her. I waited until she had her coffee. I waited until the small talk settled. How are the kids? How was your weekend? Have you tried the new breakfast place on 5th? I waited until she was comfortable and unsuspecting and present. And then I put my phone on the table between us with the screen facing up. I had taken a photograph of the second phone's contact screen before I'd put it back under the seat. Her name, the heart next to it, timestamp visible. I didn't say anything, I just watched her face. I have thought about that moment many times since. What I expected, I think, was denial, a rush of words, an explanation, confusion performed well enough to make me doubt myself for a moment. What I got was different. What I got was a stillness that told me everything before she spoke a single word. Her face didn't crumble dramatically, it just closed, like a door being quietly shut. She said my name. I said I needed her to tell me the truth. I said I was not going to sit there and let her manage me. I said I already knew more than she realized, and that the only thing left to decide was whether she was going to be honest with me, or whether she was going to look me in the eye one more time and lie. She looked down at her coffee cup, and then she told me. Not everything. I believe there are things she held back even then, things calibrated to cause the least possible damage to her own image, but enough. Enough for me to understand that what I had read on that phone was real and significant and not a misunderstanding. Enough for me to understand that it had started the previous summer, a work event Garrett had invited her to when Travis was out of town. Enough for me to understand that she had told herself at some point that it wasn't serious, that it would end on its own, that nobody would get hurt. I listened to all of it. I did not cry, I want to be clear about that. I had done my crying alone in private the way I needed to, and I was not going to give either of them my tears as something they could reframe as instability or hysteria. I sat in that coffee shop in my coat with my hands wrapped around my cup and I listened and I was completely, absolutely calm. When she finished talking, she said she was sorry. She said it more than once. She said she didn't know how it had happened, which is the thing people say when they know exactly how it happened and simply don't want to own it. I told her I needed her to leave. She started to say something else and I said it again quietly. I need you to leave right now. And she picked up her yellow jacket and she left. I sat at that table alone for a long time after. I drove home, I walked through my house. I moved through the rooms slowly like I was seeing them for the first time, or maybe for the last time is what they had been. The sage green guest room I had painted while this was already happening. The hook where his keys hung every night. The wedding photo on the hallway wall, us at 24 and 26, laughing at something just off frame, the way you laugh when you believe the future is entirely safe. I stood in front of that photo for a long time. Then I went and sat on the edge of our bed and I called Garrett. He answered on the third ring. I could hear road noise behind him, the sound of his truck moving. I asked him what time he thought he'd be home. He said around 5:30, maybe 6. I said okay. I said I'd have dinner ready. He said he loved me. I said I'd see him soon. I spent the rest of that afternoon doing ordinary things. I switched the laundry. I wiped down the kitchen counters. I helped Lily with a book report when she got home from school, and I watched Caleb eat an after-school snack at the table, and I thought about how their lives were about to change in ways they were not old enough to understand yet. That was the part that broke something open in me in a way that even the betrayal itself hadn't fully reached, not what it had done to me. What it was going to do to them. Garrett walked through the back door at 20 past 5. He hung his keys on the hook. He said something about traffic on the highway, and I turned away from the stove, and I looked at him, really looked at him, and I said, I found the phone, Garrett. The kitchen went completely quiet. He stood there with his jacket still on, and I watched the color leave his face, and I watched him understand, in real time, that there was no version of this conversation where he talked his way to the other side. I said I talked to Donna this morning. I said I know how long. I said I need you to sit down. And for the first time in all of it, in all the weeks of quiet wrongness, all the things I had explained away, all the ordinary evenings that were not ordinary at all, I was the one who was steady. He was the one who couldn't speak. He sat down. I had imagined this moment so many times in those 4 days between finding the phone and sitting across from him at that kitchen table. I had imagined anger, real, loud, justified anger. I had imagined him trying to explain and me dismantling every word. I had imagined crying. I had imagined walking out. I had played out so many versions of this conversation that I thought I was prepared for all of them. I was not prepared for how small he looked. Garrett is not a small man. He is broad-shouldered and steady, and he has always taken up space in a room in a way that felt safe to me, protective, like something solid you could lean against. Sitting at that kitchen table in his work jacket with his hands flat on the surface in front of him, he looked like someone had let the air out of him. He didn't try to deny it, I'll give him that. He said he was sorry. He said it the way people say it when they mean it, and also know that it is nowhere near enough, quietly, without looking away from the table. He said it had been a mistake. He said it had gotten out of hand. He said he had been trying to end it. I let him talk. I didn't interrupt, and I didn't fill his silences for him. I had spent 14 years being the person who smoothed things over, who kept conversations from getting too uncomfortable, who made it easier for everyone around me to feel okay. I was done doing that. If he needed to sit in the discomfort of his own words, then he could sit there. When he finished, I asked him one question. I asked him if he had any idea at all, what it had felt like to find that phone, to read those messages, to call my best friend and sit across from her in a coffee shop and listen to her tell me the shape of something that had been happening inside my own life without my knowledge. He said he couldn't imagine. I said, no, yo, you can't. We sat there for a long time after that. The kids were in the other room watching television. Life was just continuing on the other side of that wall like it always does, indifferent to the thing falling apart in the kitchen. I told him I needed him to go stay somewhere else while I figured out what I needed. I wasn't ready to make any permanent decisions in that moment, and I knew myself well enough to know that making permanent decisions from the center of the worst moment of your life is rarely wisdom. But I could not sleep in that house beside him that night. I could not sit across from him at breakfast and watch him pour cereal for our children while this thing was still fresh and raw and sitting between us like a third person at the table. He asked where he should go. I said I didn't know. I said that wasn't my problem to solve. He called his brother. He packed a bag. He hugged both kids and told them he had to help Uncle Dave with something for a few days, which was the story we had agreed on with our eyes across the kitchen before either of us had said a word about the children. Whatever came next, we were going to protect them from the worst of it for as long as we could. That was the one thing we still agreed on completely. He paused at the back door on his way out. He turned around and he looked at me with an expression I had never seen on his face before, something past sorry, something that didn't have a clean name. He said my name the way he used to say it when we were young, before everything, like it meant something specific to him. I held the door open. The weeks that followed were the hardest of my life, and also, strangely, some of the most clarifying. There is something about having the floor fall out from under you that forces you to find out very quickly what you are actually made of. I found out I was made of more than I knew. I told my sister first, then my mother. Both conversations were hard in different ways. My sister wanted to drive down immediately, and my mother went quiet in that way she has. That means she is working very hard not to say everything she is thinking. I told them I was okay. I told them I was handling it, and then I had to go be okay and handle it because I had said so. I went to see a counselor, a woman named Patricia who had an office above a dry cleaners on the main street of town and who said very little in our first session and listened to everything. I cried in that office in a way I had not let myself cry anywhere else. I let it be ugly and uncontrolled, and I did not apologize for it once. Patricia said something in our third session that stayed with me. She said that being deceived by someone you trusted completely is not a reflection of your judgment. It is a reflection of their choice. She said trust is not naivety. She said the ability to love someone fully and believe in them is not a weakness. It is one of the hardest things a human being can do, and that someone exploiting that capacity says everything about them and nothing about you. I wrote that down in the notes app on my phone, and I read it on the hard mornings. There were many hard mornings. Donna reached out twice by text in the weeks after the coffee shop. I did not respond to either message. I do not say that with bitterness. I say it with the simple clarity of a woman who knows what she can and cannot ask of herself. Forgiveness is a long road, and I was still at the very beginning of it. Some bridges you don't have to burn. Some you just walk away from and let the distance do the work. As for Garrett, we tried. I want to be honest about that. We went to counseling together for 3 months. We had conversations I did not know we were capable of having, hard and honest, and sometimes so painful I had to excuse myself and stand in the hallway outside the counselor's office just to breathe. There were moments during those months when I could see the man I had fallen in love with at 24, genuinely sorry and genuinely trying, and it made the whole thing more complicated, not less. But complicated is not the same as possible. By the time the summer came, I knew. I had known for a while the way you know things before you're ready to act on them. The trust was not something that could be rebuilt with effort and good intentions alone, not because I was unwilling to try, but because every time I reached for it, I found the shape of what had been done instead. Some foundations, once cracked through, hold a different kind of weight. I filed in July. I will not tell you it was clean or easy or that I felt powerful and free the moment I made the decision. I felt grief. Real deep, unglamorous grief for the life I had believed I was living and the future I had thought was mine. I cried on the kitchen floor one night after the kids were in bed, the way you cry when there's no one watching and no reason to hold it together. Just me and the linoleum and the quiet hum of the refrigerant. And the full weight of everything's. I let myself feel all of it. That was the thing Patricia kept coming back to. Feel it, don't manage it, don't explain it away. You spent a long time explaining things away. She was right about that. My kids are okay. That is the sentence I come back to most often when the ground feels unsteady. My kids are okay. They are resilient in the way children are resilient when the adults around them refuse to make them collateral damage. Garrett and I have managed in the way two people who once loved each other well can sometimes manage to keep the hard parts between us and away from them. It is not perfect. Nothing about this is perfect, but they are okay. I am okay. Not the way I used to say it reflexively to reassure people to smooth things over. Okay in the way that means I know where I am, I know who I am, I know what I am capable of surviving and building and choosing. Some mornings I sit at the kitchen table with my coffee before the kids wake up, the same table, the same kitchen, the same early light coming through the window over the sink, and I think about the woman who used to sit here believing everything was fine. I don't feel sorry for her. She loved well and she trusted completely and she lived fully inside the life she thought she had, and there is nothing foolish about any of that. I just know things now that she didn't know then. The house is quieter these days. The hook by the back door is empty most evenings. The sage green guest room is still sage green, and most of the time I walk past it without thinking about why I painted it. Most of the time. I didn't lose myself in this. That is the thing I want you to hear above everything else. I did not lose myself. I bent. I grieved. I sat on the kitchen floor and I cried into the silence, but I did not disappear. I found out I was still here, and honestly, that was the thing worth knowing.